All right, I'm here with Michael Buchanan, Senior Vice President and Escrow Officer with the Patel Law Group and Fidelity National Title. Michael Buchanan, welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. I do appreciate it.
Of course, man. So Michael is, like I said, Escrow Officer at Fidelity National Title. We've done a lot of real estate deals with each other over the years and seen a lot of different things. So he's going to be a huge benefit to how the title world works, what it is, why we need it, and then but we're also gonna dive into his background and maybe some other few topics. So Michael, welcome. Let's get them a little bit of background about how you started, how you got into the title world, and where you have progressed through your career.
Okay, yeah. So I progressed through the title insurance business a lot, like many folks did, and to start off, I'd like to say that the Patel Law Group is a fee attorney office for Fidelity National Title. So I'd also like to say, too, that I'm not an attorney. So I know that very much of what we discuss here today could border on
legal advice.
Yeah, legal aspects of maybe the title insurance process. And I want to make it very clear that not being an attorney, from a title insurance perspective, there's not a whole lot we can give you as a realtor or your clients as a buyer or a seller by way of legal advice. Actually, there's none. So we'll get into that a little bit later on as we talk about contracts and things like that and what we're limited to in terms of our scope relative to the transaction. But as it relates to my history in this business, I started back in 2002. Give or take maybe a couple of months. Back in 2002, I was working in retail in college, and I got a job before I got married in title insurance. And I was working as a receptionist at a small relocation advantage title insurance office through First American Title, and I worked my way up from there. So that's a very Cliff's Notes version of kind of where I started versus where I am today. I've moved around a little bit. I would say I've moved around a lot less than a lot of people have in this business. I was blessed in 2008, 9, 10 to be working for a company, Land America Financial Group. Had a group called American Title. We had a big foreclosure account at the time. And as it turns out, there were a ton of title companies who were shutting their doors because of the economic downturn. And we had an account, a very large account, that involved foreclosures. And, not to get into the politics as to why all of that took place, the fact is it happened. And there were, like I said, title companies who were closing, and we had a big account, and it kept me in a job. And I was with that group for about 4 years, and LFG, Land America Financial Group, went bankrupt, and they got bought out by Fidelity. Well, the folks that ran that account, they did not want to work with Fidelity National Title at the time, based on some bureaucratic hoops and things like that they didn't want to jump through. And so our team and the management group with American Title and the local management through Land America Financial Group moved to Old Republic Title. And we were there with them for another about 4 years. And at that time, Barrett, Daffin, Frappier, Turner, and Engel was the name of the law firm. It was my understanding that they were going to open up their own title agency, which in Texas they could do that. And so at that time, I believe they were in the process of opening their own agency, and we were going to lose that account. And so at that time, I moved on from ORT and went to another title company for a little while and ended up where I am today about 6 years ago, to be 6 years in August. And so I started out as the first employee, not the first employee, but the only employee at the Patel Law Group, Fidelity National Title at the time. And we've grown since. We've got 12 employees there. We've got multiple commercial escrow teams. We've got a residential escrow team. We've got 3 business developers on the commercial side,
Right.
and a business developer on the residential side. And we do a really good job at what we do. And we've been working really hard over the last 6 years to grow the company, to grow the business in a market that it's seemingly pretty difficult to grab market share.
Sure. And we're going to get into that and why that might be, but go ahead.
Yeah, so it's been a really, really good ride with PLG and Fidelity. When I first started, PLG was a fee attorney for Providence Title.
Okay, gotcha.
And what happened was the attorneys were doing a lot of contract work and a lot of legal work for their clients on the law firm side who were buying and selling real estate. Part of the reason why they got into the title insurance business to begin with, and they realized that being a fee office through an agency, a local agency being Providence Title, might not provide the resources and the tools that they needed to close deals in different states.
Right.
And so they jumped on with Fidelity about 6 years ago.
Right.
And the Fidelity platform and the Fidelity umbrella has given them an opportunity to be a little bit to have a little bit greater scope in terms of what we can do on the
Will
title
you talk
insurance
about
side.
that a little bit? Because Fidelity, like obviously there's a ton of Fidelity National Title offices around the Metroplex and then different areas, I'm assuming country.
Yeah.
So how are y'all linked? Is it a franchise type deal, or how does that work for the layman's terms?
Yeah, so in the state of Texas, it's my understanding that if you're an attorney, you can close a real estate transaction.
Right. Yep.
Right? So, and when I say close a real estate transaction, it's my understanding you can do that without the benefit of a title insurance policy.
Yeah,
or
I've closed that, just the lawyer's office before.
Exactly, or
Yeah.
with the benefit of a title insurance policy. And so it behooves you as an attorney, I believe, to work in the scope of the title insurance area as that relates to working with clients, right? And we can talk about what are the benefits of having a title insurance policy. Right. But, yeah, they are a law firm. PLG is a law firm here, a full-service law firm. They work in multiple areas, dealing with the law, from immigration to estate planning to mergers and acquisitions. So we've got 11, 12, 13 attorneys working there with support staff there. Yeah. So essentially what they wanted to do is open up their own title company.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily a franchise. They don't necessarily apply with Fidelity per se as much as there's maybe an interview, and that there's a discussion about what is their scope of business, what type of business do they intend to close, and then there's a conversation and an agreement. It's called a fee agreement, right? That they sign with the parent company, so to speak, right? And that company it was Providence Title before it was Fidelity, right? Exactly, right? And Providence is an agency, So you've got underwriters, you have agents, and then you have fee attorneys. Yep. And so they, like I said, they elected to close under Fidelity National Title based on the branding. Yeah.
I guess whenever we first started doing business with Fidelity, because we did business before you were at Fidelity, but
we did.
Whenever you moved over to Fidelity, and I didn't realize the size of them. And last year I got the idea that, man, this is a bigger place than I thought, because we went out to the golf tournament that you guys hold every year, and there was a ton of people associated with you guys. Now, I don't know if there was some, hiring of that, but there was a lot of PLG shirts out there. So it's a bigger operation than I realized. Yeah,
we I think we do a really good job in the marketplace of getting our name out there. You had mentioned the golf tournament. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. We've got our third annual coming up in October. Yep. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, the partners of the law firm and the sales group on the FNT side do a really good job of marketing and trying to promote the company and close as much business as we possibly can. So for sure. The partners of the law firm and the group we've got at Fidelity and PLG, we have a large network.
Yeah, right,
large network
right.
of people that speaks to why you saw so many folks come out to the golf tournament last year.
Well, in a way that makes me feel comfortable, not because you're giving legal advice or whatever, but I know that you have access to that, right? And so if there needs to be some question answered, not that we use this much or it's needed much, but I know that maybe you don't have the ability to give me a straight answer, but either I can make a call to a lawyer that can give me an answer, or you can make a call. And so that's not something that, is used very often. And again, we're not necessarily giving legal advice here, or we're not giving legal advice here, but it's a step away, and that makes me feel comfortable. And a lot of people have that, but I don't get that feeling if I go to an Old Republic or, a different title company, that there's that access immediately, right? Where I know that you have the relationship with those guys.
That's right. Yeah, it makes it very easy for us to to reach out to an attorney, right? And when you talk about what the TREC contract looks like, there's an entire section of that TREC contract that's devoted to informing the clients that it behooves them to retain counsel.
Right.
Right. And the downside to retaining counsel is it costs money. Mm-hmm. And when somebody's buying a home, they're paying a realtor, they're paying a loan officer, they're paying fees. What seems to be left and right. The last thing they want to do is hire an attorney.
Right.
Now we'll see folks hire an attorney on some higher end deals when you get into 1 and 2 and 3 and $1 million homes and up. Those people typically will engage counsel. Right. There's more at stake.
For sure.
The smaller we get, it seems the statistics would bear out the less often they're actually hiring counsel.
Yeah. Well, 12 years, I honestly, I don't know how many houses I've sold total. Not one time has there been a lawyer involved.
Yeah.
So, for me, the houses that I'm selling, 800,000 and below, lawyers are not. I don't see that at all, right? So, but obviously, you selling or being a part of transactions that are bigger, I'm sure that is the case.
Yeah. We see attorneys on the residential side fairly often, like we talked about, as the value of the property increases, what's on the line increases, and so it's. I think it's important that buyers and sellers do retain counsel when they're selling a higher value asset.
Sure.
Just for protection purposes.
Of course. All right, so let's get into it though. Let's talk about the title company's role in the transaction, because there's a lot of times I'm representing the buyer and they know that they're working with me. They know that they're trying to sell a house or buy a house that is from another real estate agent, more than likely. There's a seller involved. But then I tell them, hey, great, we're under contract, congratulations. Write me a $4,000 check to Fidelity National Title. And they're like, who's Fidelity National Title? And so they don't a lot of times know the behind the scenes working and the interaction that we're going to have. So what role does the title company play in the real estate transaction?
So that's really the crux of the matter. It's amazing how many people I come into contact with that have purchased a home, that have sold a home. They've done their closing at a title company.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They've sold multiple homes. They've purchased multiple homes. They've done a closing at a title company every time, and they have no idea what a title company is.
Right.
They have no idea what title insurance is. And, first and foremost, I would say that...
Which can be a very important thing. We will get into that later, but title insurance, in the rarest times, can be very important.
That's right. So it's fascinating to me that so few people have a what I would call a decent grasp of what it is that we do when it can be important. Now, I'll run into people who have needed title insurance, right? People who are not in the business, but have needed their title insurance policy, and they know what it is, right? And so the downside is that there's so many folks out there who have not needed to call in a claim on their title insurance policy, and by virtue of that, they either believe that it's not worth it, it's not necessary, out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
What is this thing? who is Fidelity National Title and why are they involved in the transaction.
Right.
And I think that hurts us in
Sure.
the court of public opinion.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, to answer your question, what role do we play in the real estate transaction? The primary role, basically our function in the transaction, is as a fiduciary.
Right.
And so the dictionary definition of a fiduciary is involving trust, especially with regard to the relationship between a trustee and a beneficiary. So what does it mean to be a fiduciary? It's the highest legal duty of one party to another. Being a fiduciary requires being bound ethically to act in the other's best interest.
Right.
A fiduciary might be responsible for general well-being, but often the task involves finances, managing assets of another person or of a group of people. For example, in a real estate contract.
Yeah.
So we're bound by fiduciary duty to be impartial between buyer and seller.
Yeah.
So when
Both of us.
That's right. So so when you have a client who asks you, "Hey, can you ask the title company to do this, to release $2,000 of our escrow money back to us because we need to pay this bill?" Nah, we can't.
Right.
It's in your contract that you have to deposit $4,000 of earnest money to the title company, and they're contract bound or duty bound to hold on to that money until a release is signed, if that's the case.
Because you're not only bound to the buyer, but you're bound to the seller.
That's right.
As well.
That's
so
right.
you can't do one thing for them if it potentially hurts the other party.
That's right. That's provide legal advice. That is to make suggestions as to what recourse they may have in a certain scenario. Right. There's so many. Again, we talked about the need for clients to retain legal counsel. We see it all the time, and I've had multiple conversations with you where client will bypass legal counsel because they've got a real estate agent and they have a title insurance guy that they trust, where they feel like they can bounce these questions off of you or off of me, and my response is, I can't provide you legal advice. I can give you the phone number to an attorney who's down the hall.
Yeah, right.
If you'd like to retain them as counsel.
Right.
But I can't tell you what to do about this access easement.
Right.
Right. I can't tell you what to do about,
That's a fine line to walk too, because there's a lot. I mean, you can't cross that line, obviously.
That's right.
But there's a lot of times where we do get asked legal questions like, hey, what about that easement, or what about, like, what kind of action can we take if this happens? Like, you can obtain a lawyer and he can give you more options because I can't, right? It's not our position to give you advice on how to handle that, right? Because then we're overstepping our bounds. We don't have the degrees for that. But you want to make sure and be there for your client as well. And
right.
and have the ability to refer them to somebody. Ultimately.
That's right. Yeah. I just bought a home, and I've got somebody calling me saying they were the grandson of the person who sold it, saying they had an interest in the property. Mm-hmm. What do I need to do?
Right.
Right. And they're calling you.
Right. Exactly. Well, we need to talk to a lawyer.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do. Exactly. And so I think one of the cool things about my relationship with you is that we've got a pretty good open dialogue, whether we're working on a transaction or not. I feel like for me, something that I posit to my clients on the real estate and the lending side is we want to be a resource. We want to be a tool that you can
100%.
use. Yeah, that you can use in the case that you need it. So you've worked on a ton of deals and a ton of transactions where we haven't been the title company,
right? Just
by virtue of the way things worked out. Mm-hmm. And you'll give me a call and you'll say, "Hey, I'm working on a deal. This guy just bought his house and he's got somebody calling him saying they're the grandson of the person who sold it, and he's saying he owned 50% of the property. What do I need to do?"
Absolutely.
Let me give you the number of a guy you can call, and we'll get you in touch.
For sure. And this goes for not just me and Michael and our relationship, but if you're listening to this and you're in a real estate transaction where or associated with a real estate agent, and you're the buyer, you want to ask the questions. Hey, what relationship do you have with my lender? What relationship do you have with the title company? Because the open lines of communication are always beneficial, right? Because you talk to me being able to call you, you being able to call me because we have this relationship. There's been a ton of times because of our relationship and that I can send you a quick text on a Saturday without it being like bothering you or whatever, to where that has got the deal done, or that has answered a question that needed to be answered right now. Whereas if you don't have a relationship with that title rep or that escrow officer or that lender or whatever, then they might be out doing their own deal. They get an email. It's easy to shove that to, hey, I'll get to that Monday. Whereas it's really important to answer. So as far as touching base on the relationship between escrow officer and realtor and lender and lender and escrow officer, I couldn't stress that more about how needed that is.
That's right, because the people you're dealing with on a Saturday also know another person who's a realtor.
Right.
And they've asked you for a response to a question, and you don't have an answer to it. And you say, I'll get to that to you on Monday.
Yeah.
Well, they know Bill over here, who's a realtor, another friend of theirs, and they call Bill, and Bill gives them an answer. And then, so the relationship aspect of real estate agent to title insurance company or real estate agent to loan officer, I think plays a huge role in your ability to retain clients. It plays a huge role in your ability to provide answers.
Right. No doubt about it.
Especially on the weekends, because you guys are working on weekends.
A lot of times, yes, for sure. All right, so let's talk about title policy. What is a title policy? Why is it important? Is it required? What are the costs? Can they vary from company to company? So because there's a lot of, you spoke to it, there's a lot of people out there that are like, that title policy, I've been in real estate for 10 years.
Why do I got to pay $2,500?
Yeah. What does that do for me? Like, I haven't used that one time, and every time I close a transaction, there's a $2,000 fee on there. So why is that important?
So the title
what
insurance,
is it?
Yeah, the
and
title insurance policy is, the best way I can explain it is, again, like I mentioned at the onset, we're an insurance company,
right?
So we're providing an insurance product,
right?
And the downside of title insurance is it's not tangible. It's seemingly it's a one-time purchase when you close your real estate property, and it's different than my vehicle insurance policy.
Right.
It's different than my home insurance policy because
it's not to be confused with home insurance either.
That's right. I'm dealing with my home insurance policy at least once a year. I'm dealing with my vehicle insurance policy once a month, making that monthly payment, or once every 6 months. Not only am I dealing with those insurance policies on a more regular basis, I may call in claims on those policies on a regular basis. If I get into a car accident that's my fault, I'm asking my insurance agent through Geico or Progressive or Allstate or whatever, I'm calling them, right? The problem is on the title insurance side, you're speaking with them potentially for a 30-day period, and that's it.
You're right.
And so what it is, the best way I describe what the title insurance policy is kind of trying to relate it to something that's more of a known quantity, like your vehicle insurance policy. So when you buy a car and you get full coverage on that car, part of that full coverage is collision insurance. Right? Well, somebody might ask you, what is collision insurance? Well, it's insurance against you getting into a car accident that's your fault. Right? I've got collision insurance. So if I rear end somebody on the highway, they call my insurance company to file a claim. Michael's got collision insurance. He's got insurance against that collision. Okay. So having said that, the title insurance policy is insurance against the title to the property.
Right.
So if I buy a piece of real estate and somebody comes in with a claim against the title to that property, we had mentioned earlier where you have a person who, you have a person who bought a piece of property and they get a knock on their door saying, the person who sold this property to you did not have 100% interest in the property. They only had 50% interest. I had the other 50% interest. I didn't deed the property over to you.
And real quick, let's interject on how that might happen. Actually, let's take it back. Let's finish that, and then we'll interject on how that might happen.
So I've got somebody knocking on my door saying they own a piece of the property. They would then make a claim on the title to the property. So if you purchased and you got a title insurance policy, you would give them the business card of your title insurance guy.
Right.
And you would say, I got a title insurance policy. You would need to call Fidelity National Title and tell them that you have a claim to the interest in that property. And then they would go through the claims process, and they would file that claim, and they would probably have to retain counsel, and the title insurance company would do their due diligence and their research as to validating the claim or invalidating the claim. Right? So the title policy is an insurance policy against the title to the property. Right? If somebody's making a claim to the title or to the ownership of the property, would be a more layman's term.
Yeah, right.
Making a claim as to their ownership of the property, that is when the title policy becomes necessary.
So how does that happen, right? How in the world, because I get this question all the time.
Okay.
How do we not know who owns the house?
So
it seems pretty self-explanatory. I bought it from this person, they bought it from this person, they bought it from that person. You can see the trail. Right. And most of the time, that's the case.
That's right.
But explain how things can get a little convoluted.
Yeah. So most of the time, when we see a claim on as to the ownership interest of a title to a property, most of the time it involves a deceased person,
right?
A decedent. Most of the time, we'll have the vested owner of a piece of property will have passed 10 years ago. And in that process, the decedent has not filed a will, has not probated a will, hasn't even drafted one. And so what happens is it then becomes the work of the group, meaning your client who's selling the property, the title insurance company, to work with the client to say, okay, hey, we show the vested owner is your grandfather, right? And you're telling me that, well, your grandfather deeded it to your dad before he died,
right?
And your dad has now passed away,
right?
And he deeded it to you, right? So now we have this long chain of title. We have two people, a minimum, who have been deceased, and so working through that chain. In this case, a grandfather who passed away. Did he have a will? Was it probated? Was he married? Who were the children of that marriage?
Right.
Okay, so we have the children of that marriage being the dad of the guy who's selling it, right? The dad, he's deceased also. Did he have a will? Was it probated? Was he married? Were there children to that marriage? Right? And so that's a little bit of a complicated process. It gets even more complicated when you have multiple marriages and you have multiple children.
But the way it can get funky is when that dad deeds it to a son, and the son has a brother.
That's right.
And the brother is not privy to the fact that he's trying to sell the property.
That's right.
And then 2 years later, the brother realizes, oh wait, you just sold the property.
That's right.
I had 50% of that.
I believe I did.
Dad deeded that to both of us.
That's right.
Right? And so...
And he did it without the benefit of a title insurance policy.
Right.
Right? And so there are, you run into a lot of problems when you have somebody who's passed away, multiple children, or you have a living spouse and multiple children, depending on when they passed, because the law is a little bit different after a certain cutoff time, who gets interest in the property, who gets interest in the property, to what degree. So I would say 9 times out of 10, we're dealing with a kind of convoluted vested interest in the property when there is a dead person in title. Outside of that, most of the time, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear who has title to the property.
Yep.
And the odds of a claim getting paid out as it relates to something outside of somebody passing away is pretty slim. If a title insurance policy was issued on the prior 3 transactions, it's probably safe to say that the vested owner is correct, unless there was an abstracting or an exam mistake.
Right.
So, which again, all of this work is being done by human beings. There are mistakes that happen, and so the downside on the title insurance company is for me is if there's a mistake on the exam side, it's important that we ask as many questions as humanly possible to the parties involved so that we can prepare ourselves for dealing with those contingencies. Right? We've got to ask certain questions in every real estate transaction. John Doe is the vested owner. Is he married?
Yeah, right.
If he is this his only spouse? Mm-hmm. Was he married before? His prior spouse, did they purchase the house together? Was he given the property or awarded the property in the divorce decree? So there's a lot of that could factor in.
Well, and I think that the interesting thing is there's sometimes where you do have these convoluted situations that people start to get frustrated with, like, okay, why are you asking all these questions, or why is it? And this is the exact reason why. It's because that next owner, because you're ensuring that next owner is going to have 100% ownership of the property.
That's the key. Being an insurance company, we are a risk mitigator. Right. So if you have had multiple legal matters to deal with in your life prior to the purchase or sale of your property, and you engage an insurance company mm-hmm. to insure the transaction, whatever that may be, you're going to have questions.
Expect there to be questions.
Expect me to ask you when your divorce was finalized. How long ago did your dad pass away? Mm-hmm. These things play a key role in us giving clear title to the person who's buying your property,
right?
Or giving clear title to you as a new owner of the property. So, and the downside to that is we're just trying to do our job the right way and make sure that you don't have somebody knocking on your door in 6 months saying they have a claim as to the interest in the property.
Yeah.
We're doing our best to do that. The problem is you've got a lot of people pawing at you during the contract process and the purchase and sale process.
I'm asking questions. Yep. The lender's asking questions.
That's
everybody's
right.
asking questions.
You're selling and you're also buying another property, so you're getting questions from another agent, maybe another title company.
And you got a full-time job, 2 kids, and everything else in life that's going on.
That's right. That's right.
COVID-19. Whatever.
Yeah, these unprecedented times.
Right, for sure.
Exactly.
All right. So, but how is it not required then? Right? I mean, because you can buy a house without getting a title insurance policy.
Yeah.
I would say that both you and I would not recommend that, mm-hmm. but you can do that.
Yeah, for sure. So, you can purchase a piece of home without getting mm-hmm. an insurance policy on the title.
That's like buying a house without getting it inspected. Just not a smart move.
That's right. We're doing a title inspection. Right. We're doing an inspection from today backward. Mm-hmm. Right. Your title insurance policy is good from the day of closing backward. Right. There's no real effect moving forward mm-hmm. because you could go without mowing your front yard for 10 months. And the city comes in and has to mow it, and they file a lien on your property. Mm-hmm. Well, you're not going to file a claim on your title insurance policy because you didn't mow your yard for 10 months, right? Right. So your title insurance policy is effective from the date of closing backward. Right. So we're doing an inspection that way. Why is the title insurance policy not a requirement? Mm-hmm. It's an optional product, like you had mentioned earlier. You can buy a house without getting an inspection. Is that true?
100% true.
You can. That's mm-hmm. right. So is it wise to do that? Probably not. There could be massive foundation problems. There could be problems that are unseen that might not go without being seen for 6 months. The title insurance situation is the same, right? There's nothing tying you or legally binding you mm-hmm. to purchasing an insurance policy as to the title of the property. Right. When you purchase a car and you get a loan for that car, the lender requires that you have insurance. Right. If you're going to purchase a house and you're going to get a loan for the house, there's going to be a title insurance requirement. So it is required if you're purchasing with the benefit of getting a loan. Right. If you're paying cash for the property, there's no requirement.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? So let's differentiate there. Same thing with a car. If you purchase a car with cash, there's nobody binding you to that money. The money's come and gone. It came right out of your bank account. Right. Nobody lent you the money. Right. If they did loan you the money, They want you to have some type of insurance
Right.
on that product. Same thing on your house. If you're paying cash for it, you don't have to get an insurance policy. The rub there is if you don't get an insurance policy and you're relying on the guy selling it to you to say, "Nah, I own this house free and clear."
Yeah.
And you don't get an insurance policy, when you go to sell that property, there's probably going to be a lien on title.
Right.
I say probably. It's a coin flip, right? The purpose of that title insurance policy is to corroborate the word of the seller.
Right.
Right? If you get an insurance policy as to the title of the property, we're going to be able to tell you whether that guy or gal has a lien on the property.
Right.
Is he still making a mortgage payment or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
If he is, not only are we going to pay that off, we're going to make sure that the payoff is good through the close date.
Right.
We're going to make sure that that lien is released of record.
Right.
Right. Just as it was filed of record 10 years ago, we're going to make sure that it's released of record so that the person buying does have a clear title to the property.
And you touched on the price, like one thing, and we'll talk about price here in a second, like go into a little bit more detail on it. But as it relates to one time versus recurring, when you buy a car, you're going to have generally insurance on that car throughout the entire ownership.
Yeah.
You're going to have title insurance throughout the entire ownership, but you're only going to have to pay it one time.
That's
up
right.
front, right? You
That's
don't have
right.
to pay it monthly, yearly, anything like that. It is a one-time payment.
That's right.
And so just like it might be a little bit of annoyance, like, okay, why do I have to get the house inspected? Like, that's just, I don't necessarily want to spend the $450 to do that. Why do I need title insurance? I don't want to spend the $2,000 to have title insurance. Well, it's because it's needed from a standpoint of your protection. And then secondly, it's a one-time deal. Mm-hmm. So it might be a little bit annoying that you can't feel and touch it, but it's for your protection, and it's only a one-time cost. It's not going to be yearly or anything like that, like your home insurance or whatnot.
That's right, and it goes back to what we talked about a moment ago, because it's effective from the close date backward.
Right.
We're looking at the history of the property, and we're searching the title to the property backward to see if there could be an adverse claim, mm-hmm. right? So, or some type of claim in ownership to the property that's not shown by the latest vesting deed, right? So we're going to show on the title commitment, which is just a title company's commitment to provide an insurance policy on the property. Mm-hmm. We're going to show how that property is vested, meaning who do we show as the record owner of that property? We're gonna see that on the last deed, and then we're going to search the title backward to make sure that that's right.
Right.
Did
right.
John Jacobus got deeded this property when he purchased it 2 years ago? Is there anything prior to that might lead us in a direction where someone else might have ownership in the property? Yes or no?
Right.
No? Okay, John, we're going to need you to sign. We're also going to need you to tell us if you're married. Do you have a wife? Does she have interest, ownership in this property? No, this is just an investment property of mine. Okay, well, we're going to still want her to sign a document, an affidavit, disclaiming this property as her homestead. And claiming,
to all you husbands out there,
and claiming this one as their homestead.
Right,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, so talk about cost, right? Because I know that some people might think, well, I'm going to go to this title company because I know them and they're going to give me a deal on this or whatnot. So talk to me how costs work from a title policy standpoint.
Okay.
Obviously, costs can vary from one title company to another, but as far as the exact title policy, talk to that.
Okay, so there's a couple things we'll discuss here. The title insurance policy cost is determined by the state of Texas.
Right.
So the Texas Department of Insurance has a formula, and that formula varies from price to price regarding the property.
Right.
So the formula for a $100,000 home is different than the formula for a $5 million building,
right.
Commercial building. When I say the formula, I guess I mean the numbers within the formula. The formula still is the same,
right?
But the multiples and the divisibles are a little bit different, right?
Okay.
So the title insurance policy cost is standard across the board. Doesn't matter where you go. Mm-hmm. Every title insurance company for a $100,000 house you're going to pay X for that title policy.
Right. Now, we are talking in Texas. I don't know how many other states, but there are a couple other states, if somebody outside of Texas is listening to this, that I think California, where it might vary from one title company to another title company, but in Texas, it's standard.
Yep, it's run by the Texas Department of Insurance. There is one formula, and that's the cost for the title policy.
Are they able to? Is that a maximum? Or are they able to charge less? Like, hey,
no.
I know you, Michael. It's like,
nope.
help me out with that title policy.
No. So it's all dictated on the sales price of the property.
Right.
So if that property is $256,000, the title insurance policy cost is going to be X. If the sales price is $180,000 for the property, title policy cost is going to be Y. It's going to be less, right? Because of the formula. We referenced that a moment ago. So it's fixed. Right. The Texas Department of Insurance has fixed those costs. As it relates to other costs that are not fixed that you're going to pay during a real estate transaction to the title company, you're talking about an escrow fee, which is basically a processing fee to the title company. You'll probably pay for a tax certificate, which is not a fixed cost. There are multiple companies that provide tax certification to a title company. It's a third-party cost, so the title company cannot charge you more than what the third party is charging the title company for that product. So, for instance, we use a company that charges us, depending on the size of the property, around $50. We get an invoice from that company. We can provide that tax certificate to the client that shows the cost. That's the cost they're going to see on the closing statement. We can't charge more than that cost. Then there's recording fees. Right. Those are fees that are charged by the county government. Those fees are set by the county. Dallas County, it's $26 for the first page and $4 for each additional page. When you're recording docs on a purchase of a property, you're going to have a deed and a mortgage most likely. Right. And that cost is going to be anywhere between $140 and $220, just depending on the number of pages that are involved in the deed and in the mortgage. Right. So those are basically the only costs you're going to see. From
a title company standpoint.
Yeah, from us. Yeah, right. Now, you might get charged a courier fee, a FedEx fee. Again, these are all costs that by the letter of the law we cannot charge you more than what the third party company charges us. So when you see a flat $60 fee on there for courier charges, you can inquire about that and say, do you have the invoice as to why I'm being charged $60 flat?
Does that go on? Like, do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's I would call it the lazy man's way of providing a closing statement to a customer. Yeah. But the title insurance company cannot, is not supposed to estimate a cost or guess, right? Like if FedEx charges us $34.26 for you to use an overnight label for the earnest money, I can only charge you $34.26 as the fee. Right. I can't charge you $35 and just round it up. Right. So there's a lot of that goes on. You see some other fees, courier fees, and I've seen fees that for paper, like a document fee. Right. We'll have a document preparation fee from the fee attorney from Patel Law Group. Right. We have an invoice from the Patel Law Group that we can provide the client that says the law firm charged $125 to prepare this deed. Right. But I can't charge you $130 and round up. Right. I've got to be able to present an invoice, and that's what I'm able to charge. So we'll see document fees all the time, right, for their use of paper, things like that. So, as a title insurance company, we're bound pretty strictly by the Texas Department of Insurance to be straight up with our costs.
So what's the difference then, right? Like, so why Fidelity? Why Old Republic? Why whoever, right? Like, what's the differentiator then, right? I mean, I have my reasons, right? But what can you say about your reasons why one is different or better than the other?
Well, I think the Texas Department of Insurance has
Because
gone.
they're not all the same, by the way. Like, yes, they can provide the title policy and they're bound by that price, but that doesn't mean one title company is as good as the other, just like anything else in life.
Yeah. I hope that what I'm about to say is something you can relate to. But the Texas Department of Insurance has gone to great lengths to make sure that it's across the board fair. Is the word I'll use. They want to make sure that big, huge company, Fidelity National Title, direct shop in downtown Dallas, can't outspend the smaller shop, right? We could, in a different world where title insurance isn't regulated, if one shop is going to be able to close 300 transactions in a month, they could reduce the per policy cost because they're going to have so many closings and get a ton of business out of that.
Right.
Whereas the small shop has to charge more because they have fewer closings, right?
Yep.
So they've gone to great lengths to try to make it fair, to make it even across the board,
Level
to
the
say
playing field a
that's
little
right.
bit,
We
yeah.
want to level the playing field to where a big, huge company can't outmaneuver a smaller company. So I would say, to answer your question, the biggest differentiating factor for a title company is going to be from a customer service perspective. That's really the only thing from a proprietary point of view that we can offer that somebody else might not be able to accomplish.
Right.
I don't have a whole lot of control over what type or what level of customer service another title insurance company provides you as a realtor. What I can do is tell you how well we can provide you service on a transaction that we're working on.
Well, and I think that's like anything else. Customer service is such a huge deal, especially when it comes to a huge transaction like this. For myself, doing it how many times a year, okay, like you have, sometimes it's a smooth transaction, other times it's not a smooth transaction, but you want to put all the pieces in place for your client to make it as smooth as possible. And that means getting the best people in place that can provide the best customer service. And this isn't a commercial for Michael Buchanan. This is just a commercial for, hey, you want to make sure that you have the right people in place to make sure that unless something crazy happens, it's a smooth transaction.
I'm interested to hear if you have an example of a transaction that did not go smoothly based on bad customer service.
So a lot of time, the answer is I don't have a specific example, and I don't think I would give a specific example if I had it.
Okay.
Just in the
You wouldn't have to
offhand.
name. You wouldn't have to name
Right.
names.
So where I will go with that is there's a lot of times where the response time back
Okay.
is the killer, right?
Okay.
Whenever I talk to people that say, man, Irving, which is where your office is located, Irving, that's a long drive. I say, yeah, but Michael and his team are going to be the best as far as like they're going to give you the quickest response. They're going to make sure that they're on top of things. Their communication is going to be great, which is a huge deal to me. And so if I send something to a title company and they don't respond quickly or, get back to me, hey, received or whatever, and some things are just left hanging, well, that creates uneasiness for me, which then creates uneasiness for my client. And so therefore now I'm answering questions that like I don't necessarily normally have to answer, and then they're getting anxious. And with such a large transaction, it's a situation where that anxiousness can turn into different emotions that aren't conducive to having a positive transaction. And so while I don't have a specific opinion that I would give here, I want to make sure that the people are in place that I know are going to give me the best chance at closing a smooth transaction. But now I'll say this, there's a lot of times where as much as I want to control the title company, and we've had this conversation a dozen times, not every time can I dictate the title company, because every real estate agent has an escrow officer that they like, or a lot of the agents have an escrow officer that they like or they prefer or they feel like is the best or whatever reason. So if I can control the escrow officer and the title company, I want to try and do that.
Yeah.
But there are some times where it's not going to be the deal breaker. If somebody says, hey, we're offering you this much for the house, but we have to use our title company. For example, this house right here, that Angela and I bought. We bought this house, and one of the stipulations was we'll buy this house, but we have to use this title company. If we don't use this title company, then we're not going to buy the house. And that was for a couple of reasons. One, it was your title company and you, but it was, hey, I've got the relationship. I know that Michael, if there's a problem, I know that Michael's going to tell me, right? Michael's not going to, let something slide under the radar that I'm not going to be aware of. And so that was super important to me. But the reality is, the majority of the time, again, the buyer doesn't know what the title company, like what their role is.
Right.
And so I hope we're shedding some light on that. But to where they're like, I don't care what title company you use, you might be partial to them. But if I can't play the card a lot of times like, hey, the title company is going to be the deal breaker on this thing. I can't play that a lot of times. But when you do come into that situation with maybe you've got a buyer for my listing, you're going to say, okay, we can, like, price is good. I'm representing the seller. Price is good. Terms are good. If you have to have this title company, okay, we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that I want to make sure that they're responsive. And
how does that affect you from a moving forward perspective, a future perspective, when you talk about representing somebody today?
Mm-hmm.
How much thought goes into your performance as a realtor and the relationships that you've got today
mm-hmm.
with either lenders or title companies? How much do you take into account the prospect of dealing with these people in the future? 3 years down the line,
yeah,
5
so
years down the line?
There have been times where a client has said to me, listen, like, I know this is an uncomfortable conversation, or I know that things are pretty rocky right now, and I know that you might be dealing with them in the future. So, like, I understand that. And I think this is where you're going with this, and maybe not, but ultimately sometimes where you have to have tough or stern or conversations that don't go so well. Mm-hmm. And because of the expectations that you might have, myself, versus the expectations that you might have or the other escrow officer, if they don't align, sometimes those can create friction. To your point, I'm a not ruffle the feathers guy at all unless needed. And so ultimately, if there's another escrow officer out there that, hey, in the future might give me business or might like be beneficial in the future, I want to make sure and like have a good relationship with everybody that I work with. But there are definitely times where I've hit send on a fiery email that I know is going to terminate this relationship, except for the fact that it's going to make this deal get done. Right. And so, it plays into it plays like into my thought process, but that's almost everything in life. That's my relationship with people, right? Yeah. Like people in general, I want to make sure that I'm reflected on in their mind as a positive asset to them.
Right.
Whether I'm just have a 5-minute conversation with you or whether we've been friends for 20 years, mm-hmm. right? Like I want to make sure and leave a positive like impression with them. And so I don't know if that fully answers your question, but ultimately moving forward down the line, everybody that I come in contact can be an asset to me one way or another. Right. Now I'm pretty loyal to like the people that I work with. And so it's pretty hard to penetrate that, but mm-hmm. there's no doubt that there are times where it's like, man, this person was great to work with. Just like you. Like, this person was great to work with. I could see working with them in the future, and I hope I do work with them in the future. Now, is it going to take the place of somebody? Probably not, mm-hmm. or maybe not. But, like, there's no doubt that the future is in mind in almost everything that I do.
Yeah.
So I get this question a lot, randomly, but it comes up a lot in divorce situations, or it comes up a lot in situations where, hey, they know that like their father is about to pass away or their mom's about to pass away or whatnot, and they want to go ahead and get some stuff out of their name beforehand, right? Okay. And the divorce thing I see quite a bit now. So you can talk about adding and removing somebody from title, but how does that work? Because it seems like a complicated deal, but ultimately I don't know if it is or not. So can you talk to, hey, I've got a brother that, I really can't afford the taxes on this property that just got, you know, that I just invested, so I want to put him on title in order to so we can split things, but he doesn't feel comfortable paying the taxes unless he's on title. So we need to add him to title, right? So talk about adding and removing people to title. Can it happen? Can you do it? Is it expensive? Is it easy? Is it a long process? Can you touch base on, I know that's a lot to unpack right there, but can you touch base on those?
I can touch on it. So this is where we get into some of the legal side.
Okay.
I know that that transferring ownership, either all of the ownership or a piece of the ownership, can be done by deed, by warranty deed. Adding somebody to title or taking somebody off to title, off of the title, does not necessarily call for a title insurance policy. There are
that's true. Does it affect the title policy?
Yeah, so there are some stipulations there, right? So say dad is on his deathbed and he deeds property to you, and you know, and you don't want to pay the taxes on it, and so you want some help and blah 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 blah. It's really a simple process with seemingly a bunch of hoops to jump through, a bunch of possibilities in the future, a bunch of contingencies. Again, like if I'm promoting the title insurance process or the title insurance aspect to the changing of ownership in real estate, I would suggest to you that in every circumstance like this where ownership interest is changing, that a title insurance policy is necessary. So kind of bound to say that on this platform. But at the same time, in the case that mom and dad want to deed a piece of land that they own out in the sticks to their only son, you know, if it's owned free and clear, they can do that by general warranty deed. Okay. If it's not owned free and clear, if there's a lien on the title, then they're going to have to ask their lien holder if this can be done. So there are some caveats.
Okay.
Is it possible to do it even if there's a lien on title? Yeah, it's possible. If you could go to a title company and they've got access to an attorney and they've got access to electronic recording. If I knew the legal description of your house, I could forge a deed and file it of record. And when you go to sell this place in 5 years, the title company is going to say, Jane Anderson and John Anderson are the actual owners of this property by virtue of a deed that you signed 5 years ago.
Right.
And then you would look at it and say, well, I didn't sign that deed. That's not my signature.
Right.
That's not Angela's signature.
Right.
And then you would have to fight that.
Right.
That's a gross, misrepresentation there or representation of how a property could change hands. That's kind of a drastic episode there, but it can something like that happen? Absolutely. Can you deed me your house even though you have a lien on the property? Well, if you've got the means to do it, and you've got an attorney who's gonna help you facilitate this process, you can do it. Do you need to call your lien holder first? Yeah. If you own a property free and clear, basically the advice I would give you if you're trying to transfer title and you own a property free and clear, you want to deed it to your son, you want to deed it to your brother, you want to deed it to a family member, I would say make sure you have a full legal description on the property, and send that legal description to an attorney and tell them that you want to deed the property over to your brother or your son or your daughter. And it's a fairly simple process with a couple of hoops to jump through. From a legal perspective. The attorney that you reach out to draft this document is not going to have any information on the property. They're going to rely on you to provide truthful information. They're also not going to know what's on the title to that property. So if you own a lot in Dallas that you never mow, and the city of Dallas has gone out there once every 6 weeks for the last 10 years, there's going to be 40 weed liens on the property. So when you've deeded the property to your son, you need to tell your son, hey, I've never gotten out there and mowed the property. The city's had to do it.
Right.
So there's probably about $7,500 worth of liens on the property. So
Right.
these are all things that just provide information,
Yeah.
right? And so can you deed a property to somebody? Yeah, you can. Are there some things that need to be discussed and need to be hashed out before that takes place? Absolutely. Would I advise the person listening here to speak with a real estate attorney prior to doing that? Absolutely.
Right.
Would I advise the person listening to this to give me a call so I can get them in touch with an attorney who could facilitate that process? Absolutely.
Right. What about the same thing about adding somebody? Hey, George, I want you to, my brother, I want you to come on and be on this deed. Same type thing, or is it different because I'm not giving him the entire stake?
That's a legal document.
Yeah.
Question, right? It's a deed. It's a deed, but you would just be deeding a portion of your interest to another person.
Right. Right.
So you would be shown as the grantor
Right.
of the deed as to 50% of your interest in the property, granting your brother your 50%.
Right, gotcha.
Right. So again, we're talking about deeding interest, which is as simple as a single document that gets filed of record. But I would advise anybody interested in dealing with real estate relative to ownership interest, talking to an attorney to kind of figure out how to jump through those hoops, because there will inevitably be hoops to jump through.
Right.
You and I have a mutual acquaintance who you called me the other day and said, "Hey, this guy we deal with, his dad wants to deed him the property out in East Texas," and he gave me a call the other day, and I spoke with him about that, and I asked him for a copy of the last deed filed of record on that property if he had it. And he's like, "Yeah, my dad's got all that paperwork, blah, blah, blah." And the reason why I wanted to see a copy of the last deed filed of record was in hopes that we would have a good legal description.
Right.
Right. I've not received the deed just yet.
Okay. Right.
At the same time, I'm not going as a courtesy to the attorneys who work in my office. I'm not going to get this particular client in connection with those attorneys until he's prepared, right? Until he's prepared to provide them with the information sufficient for them to draft the documents necessary for the change of interest
Of course.
in ownership of that property to take place.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Real quick, you touched on this earlier, and then I want to talk about PLG Cares and the golf tournament, like we talked about.
We got
earlier.
all day.
I know.
We got all day. I mean, 3-4 hour podcast.
Let's do it Joe Rogan style, man.
Yeah.
We'll just talk all day. But so real quick, this isn't necessarily your deal, but I know that you've dealt with it because I've dealt with it. But tax proration, where you get that information, and you touched on it earlier about from the standpoint of the costs of that being passed on, but you mentioned taxes and where you apply or where you get that number from. Where you get that from, and have you dealt with at closing? Let's say you close August 1st. You pay the seller will pay January 1st to August 1st worth of taxes, and then the buyer picks up from there. How do you prorate those taxes? And is there an opportunity for the new buyer to then go back to the seller and say, "Hey, these taxes weren't off, or these taxes weren't exact," and we can get into that. You can touch base on how that might happen, but now you owe me this much more.
Yep. So coming full circle here, we talked about there's a whole section of the TREC contract that's dedicated to informing the parties that they need to consider getting legal counsel for the purchase of this property.
Yeah.
I would suggest to you that the tax proration process and the subsequent challenges that could arise by virtue of the tax proration would be a perfect scenario where legal counsel would be necessary.
Right. Well, and this is because I would say in bigger properties, these dollars become larger.
Means something.
Right.
That's
you
right.
know, if you're prorating your taxes on a $100,000 property, in theory it might be the same percentage wise, but the percentage for the $100,000 property is the same,
actual
but
dollars,
the actual dollars is a lot less than if
right.
you're talking about a $5 million property here.
That's right. So yeah, I would suggest to you that the tax proration situation is a prime example of potentially needing legal counsel as it relates to prorations after closing, which we'll get to in a moment, or just misprorating. Right. So what we do is we have a third-party company. We have a third-party company who provides us with something we call a tax certificate.
Right.
And it's my understanding that this third-party company reaches out to the tax jurisdiction specifically, whichever jurisdiction that is. It could be Collin County. It could be Hall County out in West Texas.
Yep.
But they will reach out to them individually on the CAD reference, right, that we provide them. Yep. So when we get a contract for the sale of a piece of property, we are going to provide that third-party company with the CAD reference, the County Appraisal District reference, so that they can look that up, reach out to the tax jurisdiction, and provide us with the taxes that are owed or due on that piece of property. We're going to take that number in gross, so taxes on a $500,000 piece of property here in Dallas County are going to be, say, $15,000.
Right.
We're going to take that number and input it into our software, and it's going to prorate. Like you said, seller responsible from January 1st to August 1st, buyer responsible from August 2nd to December 31st. Now, the way that looks on a closing statement is that seller is going to get a charge for that prorated amount, $15,000 divided by 8 months.
Yep.
That number is going to be X. They're going to get a charge or a debit on their closing statement for that amount. The buyer is going to offset that charge by getting a credit for that exact same amount. Now, the buyer then in October gets the bill, and it's for $15,000, and they say, "Well, why am I've only lived in this house from for all of August and September. I'm 2 months in. I get a bill.
Right.
Why am I responsible for the entire year?" And you have to reference that closing statement and say, "Look, on the date of closing, August 1st, you receive 8 months worth of credit for those taxes. So had you not received that credit and you wanted to just be responsible for August 2nd through December 31st, you would have had to come into closing with that prorated amount that you're receiving credit for." So, look, that's how we get our tax numbers by a third-party company.
Yeah.
That's what a closing statement looks like, a traditional closing statement when taxes are not due.
Right.
Okay. That is when they're not yet due and payable is what they call them.
Right. Which happens about
8 months out of the year, or 10 months out of the year, basically, from October, November, December. Those 3 months, we're going to call them due and payable, at which point the proration reverses. We could get into that if you wanted to, but the proration reverses, and now the seller then pays for the taxes for the entire year, and then they get a credit from November 3rd through December 31st,
right.
And then the buyer gets a charge from November 3rd through December 31st,
right.
assuming November 3rd is your closing date. As it relates to post-closing matters, reproration of taxes,
yeah, right.
we are seeing a lot of that.
Are you really?
Yeah, we have seen in the last couple of years, and that is a result of the increased property values.
Right.
So, 2018 value of this home is $230,000. 2019 value of that same home is $300,000.
Right.
So we're going to close in March of 2019. Okay, and those taxes that we're prorating in 2019 are based on the 2018 amounts.
Yep.
Because as we noted a minute ago, the 2019 tax amounts don't come out until October of 2019, and we're in March.
Correct.
Right. So we're prorating on the 2018 value on a $280,000 home. Let's say those taxes are $7,000. Okay. When the buyer, so they bought it in March,
right.
They get a bill in October, and the bill is now not $7,000, it's $9,500. So we're talking about $2,500 difference.
Right.
The buyer says, "We only prorated on $7,000. My bill's $9,500.
Yep.
How do I recoup what should have been prorated?"
Right.
That's where you get legal counsel involved, right? I mean, you can attempt to reach out to the prior owner, the person who sold you the property. You can attempt to reach out to them and say, hey, here's our problem. Here's my solution.
Right.
Right. We prorated on 7K. The bill's 9,500.
Right.
Here's what the proration should have been had we prorated on what 2019 amounts actually were.
Right. Well, and you can go
the success rate of that, I don't know. Typically, we're not involved.
Right.
Typically, we're not involved with that process because we're not obligated to prorate on amounts that we don't.
Of course.
We don't know. I can't
Right.
estimate what the 2019
Right.
Taxes are
Right.
unless I've got an agreement to do so.
Right.
So
well,
we could get into that too. Like, could I just not prorate taxes?
right.
I could if buyer and seller agreed
Yeah.
that the title company was to not prorate taxes. At that point, we remove a specific portion of our title insurance policy that basically that says that we're guaranteeing that taxes are paid.
Right.
If we're not prorating and we're not paying taxes,
then
we pull that from the title insurance policy and say, look, we're not guaranteeing it.
And that would be a real interesting thing to pull. I feel like that would be a real risky thing to pull for both buyer and seller because 6 months is a long time for a lot of things to happen. One, you lose money or you can't pay that money for whatever. The seller is like, man, that money, I spent that money already. It's gone. Yeah, there's no way to recoup that money from me.
Right.
So you're going to have to get legal counsel and sue me for it or whatnot, which.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Now, I will say this. In the Trek contract, there is a spot where it says reproration. Like, as a seller, you are bound to reprorate if needed.
Okay.
I'm gonna, at the risk of saying too much, I guess, but there is a portion of the contract that does state that. And so, in my own situation, like I have gone through that personally, and from where I had to then send, I think it was like $500 to the buyer of my house because whenever we prorated the taxes and then the next year they skyrocketed, I had to send a portion to them.
On a reproration.
Now, it was done very cordially. Mm-hmm. I didn't like the fact that I had to send somebody $500, but ultimately, because it's the right thing to do, because let's say it was $9,000 that we prorated on and then the taxes ended up being $10,000. We closed in, call it August,
July
basically
1st.
half of that. And so I sent that over to them because while I didn't like it, and for that price of a house, I think there's a little bit of bush league to it, for just personally. I sent it over to them just because I didn't want to mess with it, right? I didn't want there to be any sort of like, okay, well, we're going to because that whole, hey, I'm going to keep you happy just in case later on, we need to have another discussion again, right?
Yeah.
So I sent it over to them. It wasn't fun, but it does happen. And I feel like that's something that before that happened to me, I didn't talk about much. And so now.
Were they prepared to take you to small claims court?
I don't think so. I would have liked to have maybe just see. It would have been educational to be like, hey, if you want that money, you're going to have to take me to small claims court. But
yeah, it would have been a jerk move, but
for sure, because I am responsible for those taxes.
Yeah.
If you just break it down to the fact that, hey, like you own the house from until August 1st, and you were paying taxes until that point, and at closing, we prorated the taxes through no fault of anybody, just because we didn't know what the exact taxes were. I'm responsible for that money, right? And while if you would have talked to me August 31st, whenever I was shelling out that money, I would have been like, that is just weak sauce on that. And I still think there's a little bit to that, but it's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, the hardest,
because I am responsible for that money. I did live there during that time, and if we would have had the exact number at that time, then I would have paid that money out.
Yep, exactly. And the hardest part about that is if you're the seller and the buyer comes to you and says, hey, we're closing August 1st, I know the taxes are going to go up. Would you mind prorating on this amount? You're going to say, no way.
No way.
You're going to say, no way. This is the taxes we're prorating on.
Yes.
At the same time, I will tell you this. It's almost never the taxes are the same from one year to the next.
Of course, yeah.
Almost never. And
so you could go the opposite way too. Is that what you're getting at?
You could.
Right?
I mean,
like,
I guess
hey,
they could fall.
Me.
I guess they could. The taxes could drop.
Right.
Right. And then all of a sudden,
2007, 8, 9, 10. Say that they
buyer owes seller. Right.
Yeah.
So the taxes are almost never the same. What we're seeing, though, over the last couple of years is that the property values are increasing so much that there is a disparity worth hashing out.
Right.
There is a difference in the tax dollars that's worth the buyer coming to the seller saying, "Hey, we're talking about $6,000." And when you talk about commercial property, it's a whole lot more. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference. And so it's it's there. We deal with attorneys on a regular basis on the commercial side who make it clear contractually that we're going to true up these taxes in October because we know that there's going to be a big difference.
The only thing that bothers me about that, and I don't know if there's a way to do it, but is that like when we go to the closing table, a lot of times I preach like, hey, the reason why, even though you pay your taxes every month with your mortgage payment, is because the reason why you're being charged for your taxes at closing is because we want the deal to end right now, right? Like we want it to be a clean break. And then this little provision in the contract, though, makes it to where there is some gray area to where it's, while it's closed, like one way or another, if the taxes go up, even if it's by $100, technically, like you're supposed to owe that person, if it's July 1st, $50, or whatnot. So
most of the time, though, it's small enough that people either A, don't pay attention to it, B, they've forgotten, or C, it's not enough, right? It's not enough for them to make a stink about. And so,
all right. So yeah, from a tax standpoint, it can get a little bit hairy. It's not always going to be a clean break, but ultimately, like there's a lot of times where it's not going to be enough to where somebody's going to raise the question or to where you're going to raise the question. But just know, if you were the buyer and those property taxes jump, you do technically have the ability to at least attempt to go recoup some of those taxes.
Yeah, and you would probably be successful.
Right.
If even if you did have to go to small claims court, the question then becomes, is it worth it?
Right.
I'm going to have to pay an attorney. I'm going to have to pay court costs or attempt to get the seller to pay the court costs. It would be a beating.
For sure.
Depending on how much money we're talking about.
Well, and I would say the relationship that you have with the seller also, right? Because in my case, I had a relationship. I didn't know them beforehand, but we, through the process, gained a relationship. And so therefore it was very easy to send me a text message. Hey, John, these taxes are a little bit higher. And so, yeah, I mean, it wasn't great, but like ultimately the responsibility is that generally you have to pay. So.
Yeah. And it's important to keep in mind that, look, whether you're buying or selling a house, you need to know that the subsequent year's taxes are going to be different.
Right.
They're going to be different. If you're the seller, you might want to expect a phone call.
Right.
Especially today. Right. Like between 2020 and 2021, if you're selling a house, it's possible. If you're closing today, July 22nd, it's possible that in a couple months, the new owner of that home is going to get a bill that could be significantly higher than what the appraised value was last year. So,
no doubt.
It's important to know that the taxes are going to change one way or the other.
For sure. Let's transition into a little bit of nonprofit and a little bit of from a standpoint of, yes, Fidelity National Title, they're there for title company needs, but they've also got a PLG Cares, Patel Law Group Cares. It's the nonprofit for you guys, and y'all host a tournament every year. So talk a little bit about the golf tournament that y'all put on. And it's an awesome deal. I played in it last year, sponsored a hole. It's a really cool, neat opportunity. I think y'all raised like $70,000 or something like that
$76,000 for kids.
Which is awesome. Yeah. So talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. So we 3 years ago we started a nonprofit, a 501c3 PLG Cares that benefits kids. A nonprofit that was started by Kid Craddock about 20 years ago or so. And so we had our inaugural tournament 2 years ago. This year will be the third. We have it at Hackberry Creek Country Club in Irving. This year it's on October 1st. You can go to plgcares.org if you want to register, if you want to donate. All proceeds go to benefit kids. Last year, like you mentioned, we raised $76,000 for kids, and I want to say it costs the charity, it costs kids about $10,000 to take a family of 4 to Disney World, right? And that's kind of the MO of the charity, right? They're gonna use their funds to make a child who might be in some type of need make a dream come true, so to speak. And that was, I believe, that was Kid Craddock's vision to take them to Disneyland. And so we were able to send, last year we were able to send. I guess we went to Disney World. Maybe it was last September. Mm-hmm. I can't remember when they went to Disney World, but I think we were 2 years ago. We were able to send 4 families.
Wow. Yeah.
I think we raised $36,000 or $37,000 2 years ago. Right. It was $76,000 last year. So I know the COVID-19 situation is kind of stalling a lot of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish as a nonprofit. But we're still going to host this golf tournament this year, October 1st. Right. I mean, pending any government stipulations.
Sure, of course. Let's just say, and I mean, this can be definitely like a commercial type thing, because I had a great time and I believe in what you guys did. But let's just say somebody can't be there. They don't feel comfortable being there because of the situation. Is there a place just to donate, or like ultimately, if they want to get a hold of somebody, would they get a hold of you to say, and then you can pass them along to, or pass their information along to the right person to then donate, or how would that work?
Yeah, so we've got a website dedicated for our nonprofit, plgcares.org.
Yep.
That's a spot where if you wanted to play in the golf tournament, you could register there. You could register as a sponsor there. You could just donate. Right. So yeah, if the unprecedented times are causing some anxiety relative to getting out and being around people, we totally understand that. We've got a platform for you to donate to that nonprofit and that mission as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. It was a sweet deal, man. It really was. So I hope that it goes on. I'll be out there again this year. And so it'll be a good time. Hopefully it does happen. If not, then hopefully you guys are still able to raise a lot of money.
I hope so.
For kids. But Michael Buchanan, wealth of knowledge. It was unbelievable having you on here, man. A great conversation. I look forward to doing it again. If you have any questions about title, about the real estate process in general that maybe I can't answer, and you feel like Michael would be the right person to talk to, is there a way to communicate with you, or best way to reach out to you, email, phone, whatever?
Yeah. Again, Fidelity National Title, we're at 1125 Executive Circle in Irving, Texas, 75038. My email address is mbuchanan at fidelityplg.com.
Awesome.
Phone number is 972-741-6285 if you needed to call me.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Till next time.
Thank you so much.
You bet.